You own a small business, and it ain't easy, and it may be going okay. Or you could be stuck and barely making ends meet. It's about time for a pivot. Welcome to Small Business Pivots. It's time for you to generate some cash, some real cash. How does $1 million sound? Only 9% of small businesses earn over $1 million annually. But your host is a business coach and an entrepreneur. And we're going to talk to the small business owners who've done the $1 million and more. It's time to be inspired. Welcome to the 7-Figure Club. This is Small Business Pivots. And now your host, Michael Morrison.
Welcome to another episode of Small Business Pivots. We have a very special guest today, and we'll explain why he's so special. We're all special on this planet, but there was a reason why we just connected when he reached out to me. Our guest today is Stephen Pemberton. How are you today?
I'm great, Michael. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to have you. Our first conversation was inspiring and how it came together, and then the connections of my son and the place he was in and how we connected. But I want to get to your story first because it's very inspiring. The purpose of our show is to help inspire and to give a voice of hope to small business owners who want to hit that $1 million mark or more. That just seems to kind of be that magical button, 7 figures. And you've done that, I believe, twice.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and I'm not familiar with the space that you did it in, so this will be a learning experience for me as well. So, but I know, let's go back to your journey of growing up, because I know for a lot of small business owners, we had trials, tribulations, maybe a childhood circumstance that could have held us back that we overcame. Some people can and some people don't. So let's go back to some of your roots and find out a little bit about you.
So where would you like to begin? Because I'm willing to talk about everything.
Well, how about the Reader's Digest version? And some people may not know what that is, but that was the shorter version of novels. Well, let's childhood, siblings, where you grew up.
Yeah, so for me, no siblings. I'm an only child. Grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And what's very interesting, because you're talking about trials, tribulations, you're talking about things that could have held you back, and some people let that hold them back, and then some people push through. For me, growing up is both of my parents, they grew up poor. Some of that with my mom, she used to live in Hawaii. She grew up in Hawaii. Some of that is cultural, and some of that is the way that it was. Like, she grew up poor, my dad grew up poor, and their goal was to get to middle class. So when they met, which was an interesting story because my dad is from Tennessee and my mom is from Hawaii. So then the way they met was in the Air Force in Florida. And to watch them go from poverty to middle class, they achieved their dream, and then now they're seeking to achieve more. But when I was growing up, it was very much go get a job, go to college, get a great degree, and that's how you're going to get a good job, and you stay there for 30 years or until you die, one of the two.
Yeah.
And that's how both of my parents were, and I'm thankful for what they did. They provided, they did the best they could and the best they knew how. But with that being said, that's what they told me. And they both worked for 30 plus years, both of them at the post office, and they retired. My dad just retired last year. And so as I was growing up, I just never envision that being me, even though I was told to be that my entire life. I remember being probably 10 years old, and I was playing a video game called Need for Speed on the PlayStation 2, and I'm sitting there driving this Lamborghini along the beachfront, and there's this mansion that you can drive up to, and it's all pixelated and grainy, but at that time I could see myself doing this. And I don't know what it was. Maybe it was intuition. It was just a longing for more than what I could see. And I just always held on to that. Even as I grew up and I got older and I graduate high school, even graduating high school, I knew innately that's like, I used to play sports, but I knew I wasn't good enough to go professional. I didn't get any D1 scholarships. So I went, if I'm not going to be able to go follow that dream, then I might as well go get a technical degree, because then I can at least start out with money instead of having to get student loans. So that's what I did. I was working part-time at the post office, while also going to school. I went to go get a emergency medical technician certificate because I was going to go be a firefighter. Because I thought,
Okay.
oh, that's the gravy train job. I can work a day, off a day, or maybe it's like 4 days and then you're off for 2 weeks and
Mm-hmm.
all these different things. So that's what I was going to do. But there was different plans in the works for me, and one of them was my wife. My wife and I met when we were both 18. So as I'm going to school, she's also going to school and working. But then we ended up finding out that we were about to have a kid. So
Yeah.
things sped up real fast after that. And
Yeah.
right after
Adulting
that,
came quickly.
yeah, adulting came fast. And once adulting came fast, so did life. And with that, because we were already engaged, but we were not supposed to get married for almost another year. So we sped up that time frame, got married, tried to figure out what we were going to do. I'm still working at the post office, making $13 an hour.
Hmm.
And then that is where things really start changing. Within the first year of our marriage, our son comes along. He comes along 6 months later after we get married. And then after that point, my wife says, I'm not going back to work. And so I said, that's great, but I'm making $13 an hour. So we got to figure
Right.
something out.
Yeah.
So she goes and she joins an MLM. And I just watch her put her nose to the grindstone, and I watch her get to work. I watch her sit there and she's working 14 hours a day on this business. I watch her grow her Instagram following from 0 to 10,000. And I watch her start making $400 a month. And the light bulb just went off. I went, wait, you can sit at home and make $400 a month doing that? And I was working 8 hours a day, and I used to think
Yeah.
that was hard work. And I was making the majority of the money. But for me, there was just something that it just was mind boggling that she could do that. And so that's when I ended up quitting the job and going into business with her. And then we ended up losing everything because I had no skills and no money.
Oh,
But the beauty of it all was that your circumstances does not dictate where you go unless you let it. And that's basically the Reader's Digest of where I came from, how I grew up, and the beginning of the story that led us to here.
very cool. So when we talk about here, where where do you think that came from together? It sounds like you've kind of followed in the footsteps of your parents, struggling, starting from nothing, and then you got married, and together you've created this monster of businesses. And where do you think how did you get to that level? Because, like I said, a lot of us when we grow up, you pictured yourself living in that type of house, car, things like that, and most of us just can't fathom that. We can't see past where we're at. How did you get past that?
So that's a fantastic question. And we're going to diagnose this together.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is at the time, there was nothing. There was no supporting evidence that said that any of that was possible. And to be straightforward, I'm not living in a mansion. I don't have a Lamborghini at this moment. But just to have that life, because I knew that to get that, I'm very analytical. I'm very logical. So it's like, if that's possible, there has to be a life that I've built that gets you there, even at that
Mhm.
age, even at 10. So I think one thing I did when we had lost everything, and then I started working the corporate job at 20, and I'm sitting there in corporate means I was working in a warehouse, entry level, 14 to 16 hours a day, 21 hours some days, 5, 6
Yeah.
days a week, breaking my body. But one thing I always did is I would look back at that moment in my life as a kid and think, I may not be there yet, but how can I focus on where I want to go instead of where I'm at? So I would very practically, I would go on YouTube and I would turn on videos of the walkthrough videos of people just walking through mansions and stuff and showing it
Oh
off.
yeah.
I would do that all the time. We
Hmm.
were living on what I so lovingly like to call the shack on the wrong side of the train tracks, because it was, if I mean, that thing was held together with bubble gum and bootstraps, it felt like. But and it was right next to the train track, so and it was a crossing, so you'd hear the horns and the
Oh
whole house would
my.
shake. But even in that place, I still wanted to focus on where I wanted to be instead of where I was at.
Hmm.
And I think just focusing and pushing out from your current circumstances and saying this is where I'm at. So being realistic of like, this is where I'm at financially, this is where I'm at in this moment, but where do I really want to go? And being able to envision yourself there. And I'm not saying just waking up and saying I'm a millionaire when you got $2 in your bank account, because
Right.
your mind is not dumb. your mind knows that that's not true. You're just
Right.
trying to convince yourself of something.
Mhm.
But if it's the same thing as if you're driving down the road, if all you're doing is staring at the steering wheel, you're not going to get to where you want to go. And most likely you're going to derail yourself. You're going to end up in a ditch. So for me, if there was a very practical piece of advice. I used to hate driving. Most people don't know that. It took my parents putting me in driving school for me to start driving a car. I never wanted
Wow.
to. I used to, when my parents would have me drive at 16, I would pull over to the side of the road and make them drive the rest of the way. I
Huh.
hated it. And when I was in driving school, my instructor gave me a very practical piece of advice. He said, you keep staring at what's right in front of you. He said, if you look up and look further down the road, your mind can process where you need to go. And for some reason, even in this moment, I realized that was a piece of advice I've held on to even in business.
That's that's a beautiful story. I've never thought about that. Looking further out and kind of making those decisions. For instance, if you're in traffic and you've got three exit ramps on the highway, you're wanting to go to that third one, you keep your eye on the prize, that one, so you don't pass it.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah. So how do you create a plan when because that's where a lot of small business owners get stuck
Yep.
is, okay, here's where I want to go. Here's what I want to accomplish, but I don't know from start to finish how to even do that. Did you create a plan? Is there any tips or advice you have for that?
So I would love to sit here and show you my strategic plan and my 3-year run and my 5-year vision and all these things, but it didn't in the beginning. It never went that way. I
Uh-oh.
actually, I actually have those things now, kind of, and that's just because I've been led into bigger masterminds, bigger arenas. But in the beginning, it was just pushing through it,
Hmm.
and I give credit where credit is due. I watched my wife do this first. And for me in corporate for 5.5 years, I had to do it 14, 16 hours. And I worked my way up the food chain really quickly. But what I watched her do was the same thing she did in the MLM. When in 2018, when we lived in East Texas, I watched her go into business actually with my mom to do Amazon. And even after I told her no, it's like,
Yeah.
no, we're not getting into business. We're not doing that. That is a terrible idea. I'm finally making enough money for you to just stay home. And she said, okay. And then she did it anyways. And I'm thankful that she's hard headed in that
Yeah.
way, because in the beginning I was the epitome of an unsupportive spouse.
Hmm.
But then one day I remember working 14 hours one day, coming home and she was still up. And I remember going to bed, waking up and she was up working. And in that moment, it was very innate that she's working more than me. She's outworking me. And I watched her go from someone that would cry anytime she got a 1-star feedback on her Amazon
Yeah.
store or a return, to growing that business to 6 employees and $1 million in top line sales
Hmm.
by the end of 2019. And that, now the margins were terrible. I want to be very upfront with most people. The margins of
Yeah.
that was about 10%.
Hmm.
And we had the partner, which was my mom. And so you split that 2 ways, that's 50,000. Plus you had to have cash reserves to be able to keep the business going. So it was basically nothing.
Hmm.
I was making more in corporate. But what happened was, because I could see that she was running her head through the wall, could equal that, and could equal that. It was just, they were trying to just piece it together. There was a million fires a day. But for me, it was this beautiful alignment that I was in management over a warehouse. So I was a manager over supply chain and logistics. That pairs really well with e-commerce. And I had to know forecasting. I had to know how to get things in and out. I had to know what the suppliers were looking at. I had to know the incoming and outbound as far as arrival times, everything, and how to build teams and manage them. So when I quit, that was my full expectation of what was going to happen going into business. So I had a plan.
Yeah.
Whenever I came into it, I had a plan. Now, there was a whole different plan ended up playing out because Amazon shuts us down a couple months after I quit the job. $58,000 in debt, $35,000 worth of inventory in the garage.
Oh, wow.
But it was crazy. It was almost $100,000 that was tied up in this business. And we were blessed in a couple months right before we were about to lose everything again, number two,
Yeah.
where we were able to pivot onto Facebook, Instagram, and Shopify and take all of our inventory, take our skill sets that were already pre-existing, and be able to go into business. Now, this is something, when you talk about plan, that I want to encourage small business owners, is most of the time small business owners, and I've been guilty of this, is you'll go on Instagram and you'll immediately compare yourself to somebody who's the same exact age, but they've got $1 bazillion. And you go, well, maybe I've missed the mark. But the thing is you have to look at where you're at, have vision for where you want to go, but look at where you're at. What skill sets do you have? And if for anyone thinking, well, I haven't done anything like you've done, I haven't built anything yet, but what have you done? What have you done consistently? Do you show up consistently? Do you go to work on time consistently? Build belief in yourself, because that will help you be able to construct a plan of like, well, what's my next step? I think so many times people want to build out this beautiful plan, this 3 years strategic plan. It's like, what do you do next? Instead of worrying about what am I doing when I get there, it's like, how do you just take the next step?
Yeah.
Because if you can focus on taking the next step, it'll, with the combination of your vision, where you want to go, plus actively seeking what's my next step today, that will equivalate to where you want to go. But you had to figure out what it is today. If it's e-commerce, if you're just getting started, is figuring out a great supplier, making sure that they're in the air. Like if you're United States, if you're in the United States, making sure that they are in the United States. If you are doing a service-based business, focus on your product, not on the customers yet. Focus on your product. Make sure it's something that you can deliver at a high level. It's something that's truly going to change the way that people interact with you and each other. And if you can focus on those things first, so supplier, if you're e-com, the actual product, if you are a service-based company, that's your first steps. And then after that, then you can worry about making sales. But if your supplier sucks and your product sucks, then it's not going to make a big difference if you just start going and selling.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As a business coach, I'm always encouraging business owners to take a look at your infrastructure first. Yep. If you're having challenges, and every small business has their own challenges, but I've always found that there's 3 things that a successful business needs, and that is guiding principles, which is exactly what you're kind of talking about. Like, what is that vision? Where do you want to go? And then systems and processes, which has to deal with infrastructure, and then also the people. But the people is more than just employees. It's your suppliers, it's your contractors. So I love hearing your story, because that just falls in line with exactly how we coach here. And so it sounds like it's effective for e-commerce and other types of businesses. So what do you mind sharing what those products were that you on the e-commerce? Or
yeah, I can share. I mean, because that's not our main arena at this moment. We support people in that arena, but it's not our main arena. Our main arena is in the service-based business at this moment. But our products was home goods. And by home goods, it was multiple different products. It was pillow covers, it was couches, it was bookshelves. And I'll get really, really nitty-gritty and practical just for a second. I'll go deep for a moment, and then I'll come back out. For us, we actually had 2 different stores. And what that looked like is one of them was very low cost items. So your pillow covers, your blankets, different decorations, because your margins may be less, but for a $25 thing, maybe you're bringing home $6. Yeah. But at the same time as you're going to drive sales. And then what we did was we would drive sales, and then we would also have higher ticket items. And what the higher ticket items would do is that would offset. So our higher ticket stuff is, let's say our supplier would supply us with a shelf. I'm looking at the shelf over here. Yeah. If with the shelf, maybe it's $100, we would get it for 50. So now all of a sudden we'd always incorporate shipping, because I don't know about you or anyone listening, but for some reason, when you buy something, you put it in cart, and then you see it's going to be $25 shipping, you're just like, man, that's ridiculous. But if it's $150 and free shipping, you go, okay, that's fine. I can do that.
You're dead on. Yeah.
And that's what we always tell people to do, is if your shipping cost, whatever your shipping cost is bake it into the cost of the product. Because people, 2 reasons is, 1, people, that mental trick right there, people don't want to pay shipping. And 2 is you're reducing the friction for people to buy. Right. Because if you have shipping, and then you also have all these different options, and if you want to get it personally engraved and all these different things, it's going to take more time for that customer to make a decision. So you want to tap into their emotional side when it comes to e-commerce. You want them to be a tad bit emotional, because it's not a life-changing amount of money you're asking for. And that's what we did, was home decor and decorations, for one simple reason, is it was evergreen. There's a client of mine where he really wanted to do thermal wear, since he lives in Colorado. That sounds great until summer comes. And so then what do you do? And that's what I was telling him. So then he ended up, I said, okay, I'll walk it out with you. And then he decided to scrap it all, and now he's creating something brand new that can be evergreen. The reason why Home Goods was great for us is every single holiday there is some kind of new launch that we would do, something for spring, something for summer, something for winter, something for Halloween, something for Christmas, something for Valentine's Day, so to capitalize on those holidays. And then we had evergreen products, your pillow covers, your blankets, your couches, your dressers, things like that, that were able to drive higher margins. And then again, is all that's great, but what are you doing with the money? And so for us, is what we ended up doing was very interesting. You brought it up. Once you get past starting being a startup and you get kind of more mid-level where you have employees, like that's where your money should go. Is you should scale up to where you can actually delegate, have employees take over some of the more mundane tasks so you can focus on moving the business forward. Instead of just working on the business, instead of working in the business, you can work on the business. And that's what we did quickly because we were able to scale so fast. Was we hired 4 people to be able to handle the daily task. And then we were able to just overview it every single week, have really great infrastructure, said, okay, this is what it is. This is what's working. This was not working. Let me talk to them. Let me have a meeting with the team. But it was that way we could say, we could come up with all these different strategies. I just said, this is how we're going to launch this. This is how we're going to launch that. We're going to incorporate taxes here. We're actually going to do a split test on very similar products and not include the shipping here and include shipping here and see which one sells faster and more.
Yeah, you just gave a handful of nuggets right there for small business owners. Number one is psychological pricing. So, and you are absolutely correct. I used to own a large marketing company, and one of our products was direct mail. And so we would always give them the price of what the post office would charge for postage. They wouldn't balk at all. Like they wouldn't, it was just, that was accepted. But then we'd give them our price of, we got to print this, package it, ship it, and it's going to cost this. And they're like, oh, what? But if we just said, it's going to cost you 34 cents a letter, which we're bundling the postage and the services together, for most people, unless they're a larger company, they were like, oh, that's not bad at all. So, So incorporating, doing A/B testing, like you said, and then also the working on the business, not in the business. I know for a lot of business owners, we have a hard time delegating, because we feel or think that no one can do it like we can, and that's
a huge trap.
Oh my gosh. And you did all this like within a year, didn't you? Like
yes.
Your first one? Yeah. So how did you learn some of those critical skill sets of infrastructure, delegation, working on the business, not in the business? Where did that come from?
So it actually came from corporate, because for me, is I started entry level in a warehouse. And then as I started going up the chain of command, I was up to get $100,000 raise. And that was the dream at that time before I quit the job. But everything I did was, and I didn't realize at the time that it would serve me really well, was I empowered people, because I would empower people to lead. When I was in a position that was maybe just one step ahead of someone, I would empower somebody to basically lead. Okay, so a great example is for me, when I moved to Fort Worth, when I got this promotion, they decided to do 2 different shifts. At first it was one shift, then it split into 2 different shifts. I was over the first shift. And what that looked like was, it was me, who was not a manager, over a team of guys. And what I did was, I was out there with them. I worked with them. And then over a period of time, I would identify a leader. And once I identified that leader, I said, this is what you're going to do. So I wouldn't delegate all my tasks, but I would delegate tasks that were not critical tasks. And I would say, this is some extra things I'm going to put on your plate because I see this for you. And I would ask them, where do you want to go? Like, do you want to just work in the warehouse? Do you want to move up? And if they told me they wanted to move up, I said, here's some responsibilities I'm going to give you. That way you can be seen in this light by management, all these different things. And what would be beautiful is I would watch them go out and help lead this team. It would reduce the amount of things I had to do so I could focus on actually moving that location forward. And that's how I moved up, because you're not supposed to move up within the first year of moving to a new location. I moved up in 9 months because I figured it out pretty early that people did it for me, that they identified me as a leader. They gave me more responsibility, more chances. So I would do the same for someone else. And I didn't realize that would translate. But when I moved to Tyler, Texas, they gave me this location that was on fire, basically. I mean, besides figuratively, it was almost literally on fire because of the way that the team had basically given up. They were the worst location in the entire region. And they said, hey, you wanted to be a supervisor, so here's your opportunity. And I went, okay. I was 23. And so I walked in 23. Everyone's older than me.
Yeah.
And so to get buy-in is I had to go out there and not just tell them, hey, I understand what you're going through. It's like I had to show them. So I was out there with them from the beginning of the shift to the end. In the first 90 days, everything changed because I went to each and every one of them. Hey, what's working here? What's not working here? Okay, how can I start working on the things that aren't working? And then I would actually go do the same tasks that they were doing so they understood who I was. That I'm not just telling you that I did these things. I'm not just telling you that I understand. I truly do because I'm in the trenches with you. And what happened is once they bought in and they saw that I was actually making palpable changes to the things they said weren't working, the location went from the worst location to the best location within 6 months because it's all about empowering people. So I was in logistics. I'm very much a system-minded person. So all of that, to look at these people and say, really what happened was it was just a fallout of the system. They had things in the wrong place. So behind the scenes is I had to work on the actual computer softwares, everything to better their lives. And that's what I mean when I said earlier is so often people just focus on making more money. It's like, but are you making your employees' lives better? Are you making your consumers' lives better? If the answer is no, then you will be a flash in the pan business where you may skyrocket but then fall off because people aren't going to enjoy working for you,
Right.
and the clients aren't going to enjoy working with you either. And that's those skill sets when it came into business. That's how I was able to grow so quickly. Is my wife already had some really great relationships when it came to her employees. We were able to transition them over. And what was interesting is because I'd basically been consulting on their stuff before I came into it, is even after Amazon went away and we pivoted over, I was able to say, okay, this person is not the leader you thought they were, so we're not going to put them in leadership. Who we are going to put in leadership is this person. And when we put them in leadership, it's like instead of delegating so many tasks to them, is give them 3 critical tasks and having them watch the team, be able to show how many listings they were doing, how many returns we were getting, feedback, all this stuff, but making it easier for them. And everything that I focused on was how do I make this business easier for the employees? And that's how I pushed forward and just delegating those tasks that needed to be delegated so I could focus on making the business more seamless. But all that came from corporate. And that's why I'm saying to the people who are listening and you think that you don't have the skill sets, is you can get these skill sets right where you're at. Don't undervalue the possibility of a job. Just don't undervalue it. It changed everything for me because I was able to learn skills while getting paid instead of having to sit there and not get paid and hope you get paid and try to build skills. It's much harder that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for business owners, your story of empowering people is very strong. I don't know about most, a lot of small business owners misinterpret the word empower, and they feel like if I just tell this person what to do, I'm empowering them because I'm giving them authority. And that's not what empowering is. Your story is beautiful. It's like you've got to have a set of instructions, like systems, for them to follow. And then you have to show them how, to do that, which you did. You have to be part of it. You have to be empathetic. A lot of business owners, they just think I'm going to empower you by giving you a manager role, but then I'm going to tell you how to do your job. And I love how you stepped away from it and let them do what you empowered them to do. And that's a strong nugget right there in itself.
I think with that, especially that one, if people especially if they have employees, hear this point, hear what you just said and hear what I'm about to say, is let's be honest, if you've been working in the business to get it to the point that it's at, and now you've hired employees or you've had employees do more menial tasks, and now you're trying to empower a leader, they're not going to do it as good as you in the beginning, period. And you have to be okay with the understanding that it's going to take a dip for a second, but you'll be able to skyrocket after. And what that looked like practically for me in 2 different situations was one in corporate, one in business. Was in corporate when I had to hire a manager under me, is he came into the role, and I empowered him by saying I was with him every day. This is exactly what you have to do. This is exactly what I do. This is the things that I do. This is the things that this is kind of the SOP for it. And then what I told him was, just watch me today, watch me for this week. And then after they watch me, as I watch them. And what I did is I watched them do it. I didn't sit there and say, no, don't do that. No, don't do this. I watched them.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
watched them and I let them go through it. I let them diagnose it. If they made a mistake, as long as it wasn't going to burn the place down and it wasn't going to hurt everyone else, I just look at it. Okay. And then at the end of the night, I asked them, how do you think it went? Oh, I thought it went great. What are some things that you think I would have done differently? Well, I think that there were some mistakes that I made when it came to the SOP. I missed this whole step. And so it ended up taking us an hour longer and I had to come back. And now some of the guys are upset, but now I understand it. Like that's the model I used. And then what I did after that, once I understood that they saw the break points, they were working on it themselves, they were taking the initiative, is I separated myself and I would watch from afar. I would just watch through the system and I would let them run it and run it consistently for 2 to 3 days where, hey, you got the ship. You're manning the ship. I'm in the captain's cabin and I'm going to see how this thing goes. And then after that, I would come with them, see how it went, ask the team, how do you think he did? And the team would give me real feedback. This is what I think he did great. These are some things he still needs to work on. Maybe he needs a little bit more training here. Then I would ask him the same questions. If he gave me the same feedback, then I would know, okay, we're moving in the right direction. Now I can just work on this one part. And what that does is that frees you to know that they're going to do an excellent job. And what's great about people being people is that he's going to implement things that I don't see. He's going to do things that I don't see, but because he has my mind that I've given him over time, I know that it's going to execute at a high level and it's going to better it. I've watched my manager do that where he implemented something. He came to me and he said, hey, you know how we've been doing it like this for the last 6 months? I'm actually changing it to this. And now it flows so much better. And the team loved it. I gave them the power to do that. And the only way you do that is by going through that model, be with them for a certain amount of time, show them, then follow them around, let them do the work. And then once they get that feedback, then you separate yourself and let them try. That's the only way. That's true empowerment, is letting someone try. If every time you're just coming behind them, no, don't do that. No, don't do this. Do it this way. Do you got to do it like that? Why did you not do it this way? Then you're not empowering someone. You're just micromanaging.
Right. No, I have to say this gently so it's understood. So for business owners, that if you don't know what he's talking about, then you're probably doing what he's talking about. It's kind of like the old saying, everybody has that aunt that comes to Thanksgiving or that uncle.
Yep.
And if you think your family doesn't have that person, you're probably that person.
Yeah.
So if you don't know what Steven's talking about, you might want to check out how you direct or how you think you're empowering people in the future moving forward, because it is so powerful. I have worked with a lot of business owners in the past where they continue to have these problems. And what it boils down to is they are typically and normally the problem because they do nitpick. And I'm like, if you want it done this way, you need to write it down. Well, I don't need to write it down. I've told them how to do it. And I'm like, that's not the same. We need a step-by-step process, systems. If you want the shelf dusted in the break room, you need to say, dust shelves. Don't just expect that someone can read your mind.
Yep.
And so, those business owners, if you're a business owner that's working, 12, 16-hour days, really take this into consideration and look at how you're managing your people, because it is a life-changing transition in any business. So you mentioned empowering people. What was kind of a main pivot that you found or discovered? Was there anything? It doesn't even have to be business. Sometimes we pivot in life. It could be our faith. It could be a number of things. What's kind of a big pivot that you would credit your success to?
Faith, easily.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that is I'm gonna go deep quickly on emotions, just for everyone listening, is when I quit my job in 2020 and I went into business with my wife. At that time, I had just really been starting to work on my faith again. I just started praying. And in that moment, in that time, when I quit the job, I felt like I was supposed to, came home. I was still addicted to pornography. I was still overeating. I was still coping with playing video games for 8 hours plus a day. And you keep in mind, I just quit my job.
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to build a business that pays us to be able to stay home. And
Right.
instead of doing that, because that was what was hard, I decided to do what was easy and to fulfill what I wanted and what my flesh wanted instead of actually pushing forward more into that. And at the same time, I was finally getting into church. And so the church that we're a part of and now we're a part of locally is that transformed my thinking, because all of a sudden I realized that I'm just hiding from the real problems, that I'm not actually solving any problems. And I was able to grow in my faith, which it repaired my relationship with my wife, where I was not a great husband. I was not a great father. I started refining all of those things. And once I started cutting out the things that I used to cope with, and I started actually loving on people differently, that's when the mindset shifted. And that's whenever the business went away in August of 2020, and we had to make that pivot, I was in a whole different place. I didn't run back to pornography and overeating and video games. I was able to be someone else. And that's what's carried me into who I am today. Is like with the new business and being in service-based business, it's much different. Now you have to talk to people instead of just be behind the screen.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm able to do it is because of the person I transformed from. And the person I am now, I can love on people differently. I can talk to them and actually diagnose their problem. As a service-based provider, you may not be the solution. And don't try to be a used car salesman, which like, you have to buy my stuff. If you are trying to push something on someone when you know they don't need it, then A, you're probably living in scarcity. But B, is you're not actually there to serve that client. You're there to serve your bottom line. And that may sound harsh, but I've been there. I know what that feels like. But the faith aspect is what I needed to transform my life, which has transformed me to be not only a better person, but to be a better business owner.
Yeah, the power of God is very powerful. And first of all, brother, I want to thank you for sharing that, because not many people would share all that information. Going real deep, because it can be transforming. And I mentioned at the very beginning of the show how our conversation went. My son he's 20, he'll be 22. He just opened his e-commerce store, and on a Friday, and it wasn't going very well, as you can only imagine. He had sold one of the products, and my wife was the one that bought it. So he was a little disappointed just after 3 days. And he asked me, he's like, do you know of anybody or that could help? And he said, you're a business coach. And I said, I'm a business coach. I get marketing. I owned a marketing coach, but I know nothing about the e-commerce space at all. And then you literally reached out saying, hey, I'm interested about being a guest on your show. And here you're successful in e-commerce and the things that you're doing. And then you offered to speak to him. And I just think that's another powerful message from God that kind of connected us and everything. And then you sharing your story, being vulnerable in that. So I appreciate you doing that, because I guarantee you're helping a lot of people. So let's move to the business you have now. So you got out of the e-commerce. What is it that you do? How do you offer? How do you help people?
Yeah. So I own a virtual events company called HoloCo. And the way that we help people is we build the infrastructure for people to launch their events and to run their events successfully. So everything from the planning phase through to the actual offer drop, and even to the very nitty gritty of how they drop the offer. And in a short sentence is we help people that are making an impact increase their impact and their top line sales. And it's a long story. It's not really that long about how we got into it. It was one of those God things and the pivot over into it. But this is an opportunity to love on people differently. And this is a possibility, and with this business, to partner with people in this way to increase the impact that we're making. There was a question that I got asked once, is like, what does legacy mean to you? And when I look at this business, is if I can impact the amount of impact, exponentially increase impact that the right people can make on people, then that's legacy. Because at the end of the day, if I pass away tomorrow, and this is really morbid, but if I pass away tomorrow, the only people that would cry is the people that know me.
Right.
And the people, and then give it 30, 60, 90 days, give it 5 years. There may be a plaque that says in memory of.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I'm not going to be remembered that much for the things I did, even if I become a multi-billionaire. I
Mhm.
mean, the Rockefellers, unless you know who the Rockefellers are, most people don't know who they are.
Yeah.
And they were the richest family of all time at that time.
Mhm.
So for me, is what does legacy look like? Is being able to build a company that can love on people differently and help expound on their impact to go love on people differently. Because that's how we can impact one person at a time to change the world. Instead of just one to one, I can do one to many. And that's been the big pivot and the big overview.
So you've built these businesses, and the digital space is so hard to get into as far as, because there's just so many bling sales pitches out
Yep.
there, 10x this, and we can
Yep.
get you 1,000 subscribers. So have you found, and this will help small business owners, how have you found to break into that space the right way, from grassroots, not falling for any of those offers? Because you've got your Fiverr, your Upwork, and you can get on there, and we can get you 10,000 YouTube subscribers, and we can
Yeah.
get you on the first page of SEO. And there's just so much noise out there, and I work with small business owners who have spent thousands of dollars and not gotten the results that you did, because in the digital space you got to be seen. So you
Mm-hmm.
gotta, those are things, small business owners, I want you to know, those are things you have to do, but there's a way to do it. So what did you find that worked for you all?
Easily, the number one easiest thing is be authentic.
Is what?
Be authentic.
Oh, authentic. Yeah,
Be be
absolutely.
be authentic. The thing is a lot of these people is the interesting thing is I actually believe that most of them can help you in some way,
Mhm.
but they're only going to help you in one way. And so the thing is for me, instead of having a 100% money back guarantee, if you don't make $100,000 in your first event, that could get me more clients. But if I did it that way, that's inauthentic. I don't have a testimonial that proves that every single time you work with me, I'm going to
Yeah.
make $100,000. There's not enough data for me
Mhm.
to guarantee that price point, period. And when I think of that is when I talk to people, it's authentic. This is who we are. This is what we do. This is what we've done. This is who I have not worked with. This is who we have worked with. And the reason why, I was just on a call last week where the guy said, I want to do this, but have you ever worked with anyone like me? And I had to tell him no.
Yeah.
And the thing is if that costs you a client, that's okay. That's somebody who's not there for you. They're not the right client for you because they only care about what you can do for them instead of who you are and who your business actually is. And I think that the way to cut through all that noise is just be authentically you. And I know that sounds cheesy,
Yeah.
but if you go to try to copy all the people that you see with the bling ads and the bling cars and the bling houses, if you try to copy everything you do, you're going to be a knockoff.
Mhm.
So you're not going to be you. You're going to get on calls and not have any conviction for your stuff because you just copied somebody else's. And people are going to feel that. And when they feel that, they may even say, hey, yeah, this sounds great. Let me go talk to somebody. Let me go talk to my wife.
Yeah.
Let me go think about it. And then they'll never talk to you again. And
Mhm.
it's because you came across inauthentic. And some of those people are just not the right people. But that's the number one piece of advice I give to anyone is just be you. You are
Yeah.
uniquely made. Nobody can beat you at being you. Now, you can't beat me at being me, but I can't beat you at being you. So just be you.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. And I know for those of us small business owners who struggle from time to time on the digital channels, we hear that stuff all the time. And so we think, oh, wait, but here's an offer that somebody just sent. Maybe this one will work.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't. Authenticity goes a long ways. And it also keeps you from becoming a commodity, in my opinion. Because if you're
Yes.
like someone else, then what makes you different? Why would now I'm shopping on price because
Yep.
everybody's
And you
the
don't want to do
same
that.
versus quality and things. I know when we owned a marketing company, we would tell people that all the time. It's like, they're like, I need to have X amount of revenue coming in from this event. Like if they were having an annual event, we sent out a postcard for it. Can you guarantee, like, what's the return? All these things. And there's no, if someone guarantees you anything, you need to
Run.
run.
Mm-hmm.
Like those are the people, like that would be my first shopping tip for small business owners. If you're looking for a service, SEO, YouTube, whatever it is, you got to have those things. If it's appropriate for your industry, you got to have those things. But when you're shopping, that would be the first thing I'd look for, is if there's a guarantee or a promise, just cross those off your list.
Mhm.
So your online event service, what are the events that kind of helps other people with? So is that like seminars,
Mhm.
trade shows, things like that?
Yeah, so trade shows, actually, I would refer you to someone else. There's a
Okay.
gentleman I know who's been doing that for about 20 years. So he's great. I would refer you to him if it
Okay.
was trade shows. But again, right there, authentic instead of just
Yes.
saying yes to everything. The only reason I pointed that out is I wanted people to see that in action and to hear that in action
Mhm.
is be authentic. I don't
Yes.
do that. And for us, our main flagship product is actually an automated event. And the way that we do that, we've actually partnered with a virtual events platform that is very similar to Eventbrite or Ticketmaster. It's a $3 million platform. And
Wow.
we're the first partner with this platform in the last 4 years. And we're able to actually host hybrid events or completely virtual events. So hybrid just means you can be live on a stage and people can see you online in a very robust setting. So that's our main flagship product, is that automated event. We also do the master classes. Master classes are big. That's something that we do as well.
Yeah.
Seminars, another one. Challenges is a big market right now too. So all those things we build out from start to finish on every single piece of those events.
What type of client or size of client does that typically fit what you offer?
So coaches, consultants, and authors. Bonus points if they are an author plus an expert. And typically, and usually when people ask me why is that the case, is authors most of the time, if they're writing a book on business or investing, are typically a business owner or an investor. And books make a great lead magnet. Typically, the business owners that we work with, they have to make at least $100,000 keep, like $100,000 profit minimum for them to work with us. And then that's kind of the main requirements, is that you are a coach, a consultant, an author, somebody who already is helping people in the arena that you're in. You have a offer that's proven on the back end. And or if not, if you don't have an author, but you're somebody who's done really well in business, then we can construct that offer. What does it look like to be able to serve the clients at a high level?
Well, I can't believe our time is coming to an end. It's already been almost an hour here. So before we reach that hour mark, I'd like to have you share, how can people get a hold of you?
So StephenPemberton.com is a great resource that has all of my social medias on it. It also has a link out to all of our services if people want to go look at it. And then also Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, just Stephen Pemberton on there, or Stephen Keanu Pemberton. I know on Instagram, Keanu's my middle name. I'm Hawaiian, but look for the guy who kind of looks like Jason Momoa and his name's Stephen. And then you probably have the right guy. If not, screenshot it, send it to Michael so Michael can show me, because that'd be hilarious. But that's the best ways to reach out.
Yeah. Okay. So you accept connections on LinkedIn and things. I know that I'm on LinkedIn, pretty active on there. So I will accept most connections. I do not accept all connections.
Yeah, I don't accept all connections.
Yes.
And I think this is just one last tip for a small business owner, especially a startup, is if you are reaching out to somebody who you see as a potential client or an ideal client, let's say, I'll get more specific. That's your ideal client, is don't pitch them on the reach out. Don't pitch them on the interaction. Don't say, hey, I see that you are a coach. I am helping coaches right now make $1 million in the first 2 months. Do you want to work with me? Here's my price. Here's my Stripe account. Go buy my stuff. It's like, if you do that, no one's going to buy, and they're definitely not going to connect, and you're going to get blocked a lot. Is being authentically you, be you, reach out and actually want to make a genuine connection. And you're there to serve first. If you serve first, that'll be a deeper connection. If they are the right client, then they will want to work with you because you're giving first instead of trying to take first. So that's just my 2 cents on that.
That's another solid tip. There are so many business owners that still follow exactly what you just talked about. I just got one this morning where I was on LinkedIn and they liked like the last 10 to 15 posts that I had made. They sent me something in my DM that was about a mile long. They sent me an email, and first email, and then they sent me a second email like an hour later, and I said unsubscribe. And then they sent me another email that said, what did you not like about this? Was it the way I came across? I mean, I'm like, dude, like, what are you not getting here?
Yeah.
But I get those every day. So there's still a lot of people doing it that need to learn that lesson. They will do better being authentic and genuine and empathetic and all those other great things. So, Stephen, I appreciate you taking the time to do this. You've been a servant today, helping a lot of people, and I appreciate it. Any last words, and we're going to sign off?
No, I don't have. My last words would be, firstly, just thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this to air. Secondly, for those of you listening to it, is you can look at where you're at and still go to where you believe that you're led to. Whatever your vision is, you can achieve it. It doesn't matter if you have 2 cents in your bank account. It doesn't matter if your house is getting foreclosed on. Don't let those situations dictate who you are. You are not the circumstances around you. You can make the life that you actually want to live.
Absolutely. Amen, brother. Well, you have a good day.
You too.
All right. Thank you.
You've been listening to Small Business Pivots. A lot of small business owners are feeling stuck, bogged down, barely making ends meet. But it's Michael's passion to help you change all of it. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and we hope you've gotten some useful advice from it. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, find us on YouTube at Business Ownership Simplified. See you next time on Small Business Pivots.